Hi, welcome to Pinkerton Academy and to one of America's best school-based wood shops. My name is Graham Oakes. I started turning in 2004 and found myself in a very interesting dilemma. I had all the resources I needed at school, but at home I had absolutely no tools. I began experimenting with our school tools and found that with a Ellsworth or side grind bowl gouge, I can replicate most of the cuts used by all the other tools in the shop. Now that you know what the tool is, let's talk about the parts of it. A gouge such as this has three parts to it: a side, a wing, and a nose. The nose of the tool is primarily used for taking away a lot of wood, which is called a roughing cut, or taking away a very little amount of wood, leaving a smooth surface, which is known as a finish cut. The side of the tool is mainly used for roughing and finishing, as we said before. The wing of the tool has a different purpose, and that is refining. Refining is basically making the shape that you want and creating the correct curvature of the piece. Now that you know the parts of the tool, let's talk about what it can do. All the pieces you see in front of me were primarily made using just this gouge. Some of the hollow vessels, however, were hollowed out using a homemade hollowing tool. But nonetheless, using an Ellsworth gouge will in the end make you a better turner. The first cut we're going to be looking at is called a roughing cut. And this cut is going to be removing a lot of wood in a very short period of time and give the wood a very rough finish. The area in red is the side of the tool. This illustrates the edge that we're going to be cutting on. I'd also like you to notice the technique I'm going to be using and where the tool handle is going to be placed throughout the cut. Because the bowl is at a smaller diameter on the chuck end, my bowl gouge has to be positioned higher to catch the bevel. As I proceed through the cut, I am going to lower the tool handle to keep the bevel at the same place throughout the cut. Now that you know how the tool is used, let's see it in action on a piece of wood. You can see by the size of these shavings that it's a roughing cut, and as I said before, it's going to leave a rough texture to the wood. The second cut you can use for roughing out bowls on the outside is a roughing cut using the nose. This cut is going to take off a little bit less wood and leave a slightly better finish, but also roughing it out nonetheless. The area illustrated in red here is the actual part of the tool that's going to be touching the wood and doing the cutting. The position of this cut is a little bit different than the position of the side roughing out cut. For this cut, I'm going to keep my tool handle about waist high, and I'm going to push through the cut with my body and not lower the handle to keep the bevel touching the wood in the same spot throughout the cut. I'd like you to notice the position of the flute of the tool. When I say flute, I mean the bored hole in the shank of the tool. For this cut, it's going to be pointed a little bit toward the ceiling, about at a 45-degree angle. This is going to make the bevel come in contact with the wood to create a much smoother cut. Now let's see the cut in action. As you can see, the surface of this is a much smoother finish than the previous roughing cut. The shavings from this cut are also smaller, but nonetheless a lot of wood can be removed in a relatively short period of time using this cut. The next cut is a refining cut. A refining cut is going to take off a little bit of wood and leave a rough texture to the wood, although it's going to get our bowl to the shape we want. The part of the tool I'm going to be using is the very tip of the tool, laid perpendicular to the tool rest. And we're not going to be using a full sweeping motion as we did before in the roughing cuts. We're only going to be working on the portions of the bowl that appear to be very rough and bumpy. The purpose of this cut is to eliminate most of these lumpy and bumpy things and get the approximate shape of the piece we're working toward. Now let's see what the cut looks like in action. Usually when you're doing a refining cut, it'll take you a little while to go through the entire piece and make the curvatures all uniform. For the sake of time, we're going to skip this part and do a finishing cut. A finish cut is going to be using the side of the tool in a vertical position to give a very smooth surface to the wood. The side of the tool is the tool from the wing down to the end of the cutting edge. This is a very long area, and when you touch the whole area of this onto the wood, it creates nice shearing cuts that are going to cut the wood away rather than scrape it away. I've changed bowl blanks for this cut to show you how this cut can be very effective even on really tough, dry, punky wood like black willow. The technique of this cut is key. We must keep the bevel of the edge on the side of the cut cutting at all times. If we come off of the wood, it's going to create a little divot and ruin our finish cut. I'd also like you to notice the angle at which my tool is. It's at a very, very steep angle. This in turn is going to give me the angle I need to get the entire edge on the wood. I'd also like you to notice that my wood I'm going to be cutting in a different position than I was last time. For the other cuts, I was moving uphill. For this cut, I'm going to be moving with the grain downhill, as not to tear out any of the fibers of the grain. When doing this cut, it is necessary to look for these very light, fluffy shavings. Now let's try it out and see what kind of surface we can get. Notice how smooth the wood is after that cut. And this is part because I am not actually touching the bevel of the wood onto the actual workpiece. Rather, I'm using only the very edge of the cutting edge. The second and final finish cut I'll be showing you using the outside of the bowl will involve using the nose of the tool. By touching the nose of the tool to the wood and rotating outward slightly to catch the bevel, we can catch the shavings that we want and create a very smooth surface on the wood. I'm keeping my tool handle at my hip and two of my fingers underneath the bowl gouge and one of my fingers underneath the tool rest holding it down. For this cut, I'm not going to drop the handle or raise the handle in any way. I'm going to find where I'm getting the most effective cut and work through the piece. By rotating my tool up, it's going to give me a slightly more aggressive cut. And by rotating down, it's going to give me a smaller cut and give me a smoother finish. I'll show you what I mean when I'm talking about rotating. You can see here, the wood is very smooth up top and very rough on bottom. These are the two contrasting woods, with the rough being the roughed out cut and the smooth being the smooth finish cut that we just got.